All right, so this morning we're going to be talking about characters and you, and what makes a character and what makes you you. Last time we got done talking about, not scripts, we got done talking about story. We got done talking about writing. Today we're going to focus on one particular major component of storytelling, and that is specifically character. So that's my question for you guys this morning, and something to kind of contemplate as you guys are going through stuff. What are the components of a character? So we've talked about the components of a story. We've talked about components of a video. But today I want to focus on the components of a character. What makes you, you? What makes a character a character? And here's what I want. I want the person in your group that is the best looking, most outgoing, and most individually caring person in your group to speak on behalf of your group. That's who I want to hear from this morning. You guys have 2 minutes, talk it out. I'll be back in a second. All right. Where are my good-looking, outgoing, and caring people at? Right? All right. Cool. All right. We're gonna start with Kai. Apparently. What do you got? What do you got, sir? Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Let's start going through this stuff. What do you got? Give me a component of a character. Yep.
Of a character has history.
History. Cool. Fair enough. Anyone else want to answer, or try and give an answer for this? Any more good-looking, outgoing people? Caring people. Go for it. Lay on it. Emotions? Okay, cool. Fair enough. Then Madison, what do you guys got? Morals and values. Okay, so we have a history. So characters have history. There's something that's happened to them over time. They have a story that kind of tracks with them. Is kind of, I think, what people are hitting at, because that's where we get our English word for story, is from the English word historia, history. Okay, emotions, so it's got to be something you can kind of feel out with an individual, and it's also going to have moral values, which is really interesting, because if you think about the morality that comes into play, it helps with the decision making of a character. Okay, pretty good place to start. That's definitely a good place to start. If you were paying close attention to the question actually has the answer in it. Because I talked about what are the components of a character, but if you go down here, I asked you to give me the best looking, most outgoing, and most individually caring person from your group. And so those three components, those three things, are part of what makes up an individual, or makes an individual an individual. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time today talking about what makes a character a character. And as a result of that discussion and talking about things, I'm kind of hoping that you will start to discover a little bit more about what makes you, you. Because in the story of life, as it were, you are a character. If there is actually a legitimate theory that has been put forward that says that we are in a simulation. It's called the simulation theory, right? Where basically everything that we see around us is nothing more than a computer program that is being executed. As it's being executed, you, myself, everyone else around you is just following commands that have been given to them by whoever is programming or inputting those commands into the program, the system. And that all of us are no different than sim characters inside of a simulation game. Okay? What's really interesting about that particular theory is that you still have to have characters that are inside of that particular game. Those characters can't necessarily all be the same, because if they're all the same, then they're not going to be able to provide anything new to the program, right? So if you program individual characters that have characteristics that are random and different enough, they in theory would be able to bump into each other and continue to grow and make the program get better, right? It's like artificial intelligence, artificial learning. Now what's interesting is, as I'm putting this forward, it almost sounds like a religion, right? So if you think about it in that particular way, the programmer would be kind of like a god. Then you'd have people that are coming down here and doing specific program tasks, okay, following rituals and so on and so forth. You can kind of see how those kind of go in together. Also with that theory, you also get the theory of evolution, which is where you come in and people tend to get better or worse depending on how things turn out for them. Some people try and evolve and move to one level this direction, doesn't quite work. So they evolve and move into a direction this direction, might not work. Might evolve in this direction. Oh wait, good, that works. Let's keep going that particular direction. All of these things so far are theories, because as we discussed and talked about last class period, in order for there to be a concept of time and a concept of understanding, you have to be able to step outside of time in order for you to really understand a setting, and we can't do that. So no matter how we try, there's always just going to be these theories that are out there that we can kind of subscribe to. Well, when you're trying to tell a story, and we know that it's happening in this particular time period, we have to take a look at what makes us us in order to better understand the things that are outside of us. Hopefully that makes sense. And so what I'm going to try and do is try and explain that a little bit today, because the better we understand story, the better we can apply those stories to our video, the more likely you are to get a reaction from your audience, and the better your video turns out. Right? Why today did people pay attention more to the generational gap video as opposed to the announcements each and every single morning? Right? The answer is because the students that were putting that together understood that, hey, we got to pay attention to the components of a character and make sure that people feel like they're more involved in that particular space. The more involved they feel like they feel, the more they're attached to the emotions, which you guys talked about. The more attached to the emotions they are of the character, the more they're attached to the history, the more attached to the moral values of the individuals, whether they have them or don't have them, right? So let's kind of jump into characters and what makes a character a character. Here are the three components of a character. Okay, first thing you have to deal with are the physical traits. Okay, the second thing you have to deal with is the personality of the character, and the last thing you have to deal with is the relation. And what's really interesting is when you understand these characters and you realize that settings can become characters, well, now all of a sudden the physical properties of a setting come into play. The personality of the individuals inside of that setting come into play. And the relationship that that setting has with its outside other settings also come into play. And so you can see how settings can transition to become characters. And so the better we understand how those interactions work, the more likely we are to identify ourselves and take a look at weird, crazy theories that people might put out there and go, is this right? Is this applicable, or is this not right? Okay. Also, the better you understand these three things, the physicality, the personality, and the relational, the better you can understand how people will communicate with one another. Okay. And we'll start discussing and talking about those things as we continue to move through these things. All right. So this is all review. We talked about how a story is a production and how in order for us to bring something forth, which is what the production actually means, we have to have a written or a visual account of events. So we need to figure out what's going to happen. It can be real or imaginary, okay? True or false. That the morality part doesn't necessarily come into play yet. We have real and we have imaginary. Because if you try and tell a story that's in an imaginary world, you can still have real things happen to those characters that apply to you and other characters out in life later on. Sometimes some of you might understand this when I say sometimes when you watch a television series, it seems like what's happening to the characters is more real than what's actually happening in your real life, right? Like you see a character struggle with the decision in the way that you would struggle with the decision if that were you, but it's imaginary, it's just happening to this character, but you would understand how that would work in real life. That's what good stories actually do, right? They provide the entertainment side of things, but they also allow you to take a look at the lesson and morality that's involved with it. Okay? We also talked about the components of a story and talked about how characters are a component of that particular story. I spent a little bit of time on settings during the last lecture. This lecture, I'm going to spend more time on characters, and then as we get into script development, I'll spend more time on the other 4. Okay? But I want to kind of nail down the physical traits. Now, one thing I want to point out, this example right here, where it says EX on down, don't write that down. It's never going to appear anywhere or show up anywhere. That's just an example for me to read off to give as an example for you. Okay? Other stuff might appear up on a quiz or a test, and so you might want to take a look at those and kind of copy that information down. But the first thing I want to discuss and talk about are physical traits. Okay? When you first encounter a character, the first thing you're going to see is the visual understanding or the physical traits. Physical traits give the reader or the viewer an understanding of a character right off the bat. Okay? Is this a character I can get to know better, or is this a character that I don't want to know at all? When you start and play a video game, one of the first options you have after you figure out what kind of video game you're playing, you establish the setting, is you get to choose or create your character. Right? Because you want to know what the person is like that you're playing with. And if you can customize that particular character to fit your model and your mode of thinking, and something that you particularly like, you'll be more drawn to that particular character. This is why games like Fortnite were able to be free to play, but they were able to charge for skins and make a buttload of money. Right? Because we care what we look like. We care what these characters look like because we make a decision, right or wrong, we make a decision based on how individuals looked. Okay? There are some people that make a decision about me as I walk in and come up here to talk each and every single day because I wear a hat and don't do my hair on some days. Or I'll be wearing my suit jacket on some days and not others. Okay? Our appearance is the first indicator that other individuals have or other subjects have of how we as an individual operate. So if I see someone coming in here constantly dressed in sweatpants, my understanding of that individual, right or wrong, is that they're typically lazy or want to feel comfortable. Okay? And so I will be asking myself as a viewer and as a reader, why does that person appear to be lazy? Because usually sweatpants and stuff like that are associated with laziness. Or why does that person want to feel comfortable? Okay, is it because they feel uncomfortable in other areas? Is it because they're just really tired and they come in the next day and they're just like, I don't have time to really deal with this or think about this. I kind of want to just relax. Okay. Conversely, if someone is always coming in here in a suit, my first thought is, wow, why is this guy always thinking about being dressed? Why is this individual always trying to be professional? I just want to have a conversation, dude. Like, what? Like, can I have a conversation? I don't even know if I can approach you because apparently everything has to be perfect before I can approach you, and I am definitely not perfect. So there's no way I'm going to be able to necessarily approach you, right? So when you first start out with physical traits, when you start describing how a character looks and describe why a character looks that way, or when someone else does, that plays an important part in your understanding of what's going to happen to them in the story. Okay? Irregardless if you want it to be right or not, right? There's this old saying, don't judge a book by its cover. The problem is that you have to. You do. There was a bookstore, I think it was in Oregon, that tried out this theory where people were not allowed to judge a book by its cover. They took all the books that were inside of its particular bookstore. This is like back in the 80s or 90s, if I remember correctly. They covered them with cardboard paper, right? Those like paper bag type paper, and just put the title of the book on the front. People would go into the store and just take a look at all these books that are with the spine, with just the titles on them and the author's names. That's it. No pictures, nothing else in there. Sales went like this. They dropped down completely, right? YouTube, before it allowed you to add in your own thumbnails, videos were like this, right? Because we make judgments, again, right or wrong, that doesn't really matter at this point yet. We make judgments based on physical appearances, what we see or perceive with our eyes or even our mind's eye, if that makes sense. Okay, so it matters the physical traits for your particular character. So here's my story. Here's my example. I have a buddy named Josh. He's a Caucasian 20-something man. Actually, he's 30 now. With short, semi-curly brown hair and matching eyes, right? Asked if he's ever tried out for a basketball team, Josh tends to coil up and reply with an angry no. Instead, he's an accomplished musician. Okay? So based on this, what can you tell me about Josh's physical features? Go for it, Leona. He's tall. Now, I didn't say he was tall. How do you know that? Cool. People were asking him if he was trying out for basketball, right? So the only way that she can come up with that particular understanding is if she, the reader or the viewer, understands basketball, right? Because if you don't understand basketball, and you don't understand that typically basketball players are tall, you're never going to know or infer, that's the word we're actually looking for, infer that Josh is a tall individual, 6'3", 6'4", right? You're not going to be able to get that understanding unless you know what basketball is. So when you're creating your videos, you're starting out with a different understanding than your viewers. Some viewers might know something, some viewers might not know something. For example, when we show BNN or when we do BNN, right? When you take a look at individuals, it'll take me a second to pull it up here. When we take a look at individuals, they look and appear to be the same height. The reason why we do that is so that way it looks balanced between our individuals, right? If you take a look at, actually let's not even do this. He's going to hate me for doing this, but I'm going to, no, I don't care. Nobody cares. If you take a look at Kellen right here. As soon as we fast forward, fast forward, fast forward, fast forward. Kellen and Sammy, right? Look about equal in height, right? You don't realize that Kellen right here is standing on about a foot of paper or on an apple box, okay, in order to bring his height up because he's like 5'2" and she's like 5'8", right? If she appears taller than him, she's going to seem more powerful. She's going to seem like someone who has more authority than him because he looks small and weak. So one of the ways that we make sure that individuals are taken equally as serious as best as we possibly can is to get them to be about the same height. And you'll notice that on all the BNN episodes, everyone appears to be about the same height. Okay, if I go back up, I gotta pause this because I don't want that to go again. Okay, but if you take a look at all this, they seem to be about the same height, they seem to be about the same height, these guys seem to be about the same height. Okay, everyone appears to be about the same height as they're standing up here because we want to make sure that each one is taken equally or assumed to have as equal authority when discussing certain things. So a physical appearance actually matters, right? Not because we're saying one person is better than the other, but because of how the audience perceives it. So your parents are always telling you, do your hair when you get up in the morning and go out and stuff like that. It's not because you have to do your hair each and every single morning before you get up and go out. It's because how do you want to be perceived by people today? Do you want to avoid people? Because the best way, or people to avoid you, the best way to do that, have your hair like completely undone. Like don't do it at all like I do, right? Wear something dark, wear something comfortable, and have a very closed in posture, right? Because it makes you feel like you're introverted. No one will talk to you. Walk around with your eyes down, never looking at people and so on and so forth because that first indicator, that first barrier isn't broken, okay? Once you do get past the physical traits of an individual and you can start taking a look inside of that individual a little bit more, once you get past the first barrier, that's when you can start taking a look at the personality traits. Now again, you're going to start to see, again, 2 more examples. You don't need to write those down. It's up to you. If you want to do that, it's not going to appear on any test or anything like that. Okay? So the next thing I have, and I want to go over, are personality traits. So barrier 1 is get to know the person physically. See what they look like. Right? If you're blind or deaf and you can't figure out how to get inside of that specific space, you have to move past the physical traits and automatically into the personality traits when getting to know someone. It's a little bit harder for them to do. They only have 2 criteria, 2 components to judge people off of, right? So the next thing is the personality trait. Personality gives the reader or the viewer the emotional understanding, so like you guys were discussing and talking about, right? If I'm attached to a character, in order for me to understand how a character acts and why a character acts that way, I have to be emotionally led or allowed to be emotionally led by the characters. If I, in my life, have had bad things happen to me, there's no incentive for me to want to go read or incentive for me to go watch the actual news because I am not emotionally invested in individuals telling me the truth since I've constantly been lied to, right? So this is where like different stories that happen to you actually begin to affect why and how you perceive the world around you, okay? If bad things happen to you, you start to close off certain doors. Sometimes you don't allow people to even get past the first barrier, which is the physical barrier, right? The second barrier right here, the personality one, is a little bit more difficult to get past because now you have to allow someone to get inside your brain in a sense. Right? That's where the personality is. Personality isn't something you wear. Personality isn't something that's seen. It's that thing that's inside of you that only you can kind of discuss and converse back and forth with. Right? So in my buddy Josh's case, Josh is disrespectful and tends to shy away from those in authority over him. Right? So that's interesting. He's disrespectful and tends to shy away from those in authority over him. Typically, when you first meet him, most people are like the way that he looks, like the way that he kind of comes across because he's very professional. But once you start to get to know his personality, people tend to like, woof, no, not going to go near that. Don't want to be friends with that guy. Right? And again, the reason why is because he's disrespectful and tends to shy away from those in authority. Is it because he doesn't like those people? Actually, no. It's a little bit different than that. It's a little bit deeper than that. So barrier 1 is the physical sense. Barrier 2 is the personality sense. Barrier 3, or the third component, is the relational sense. Relational traits. So relational traits give the reader or viewer a deeper understanding of the character, and what's not written up there is how he or she interconnects with other characters around them. Okay, this is the deepest level you can get with an individual. It describes how a character relates with others. So not just how they act, but now how they take how that individual know or what that individual knows about themselves and acts with other people inside of a particular space. Okay? So in the case of my buddy Josh, turns out Josh and his parents actually don't get along very well. While Josh is an accomplished pianist, his father always wanted him to be into sports, which is something that Josh does not like. So you can see why someone who is brand new, has no idea what's going on, when they walk up to Josh and the first thing they say is, whoa, dude, you're tall. Do you play basketball? He's going to have or reply with a very angry no. It's not because he hates the person. It's because way back in his day, his dad tried to force him to be into sports, and that's something he didn't want to get. So anytime anyone brings up sports, it reminds him of his relationship with his father, which he then takes out on that other individual. Right? Because that's the interconnectedness of people, which is why you can't really just walk into a class one day and someone throws down their stuff and puts their head down on the table and stuff and just starts beating the crap out of the table. You can't just walk over and start yelling at that person and be like, hey, that's rude. You're horrible. What the hell are you doing? Stupid idiot. Why are you breaking my desk? Like some teachers do, right? Okay, if like you were a student in here that did it. First thing is like, whoa, what's going on? Because there's other stuff that's happened way behind the scenes. You're seeing the physical manifestation of something that's happening deeper down, right? So that just comes up to the surface and, quote, explodes. And so once you start to understand this stuff a little bit better, and you know what makes you you and what it makes individuals where they can relate with others, you can start drawing inspiration from the actions of others and be able to add those into your story, right? Not only that, when you add them into your story, you might find out something else about yourself, right? By the way, this is the way that guys and girls typically tend to get together, okay? If you're afraid a guy is just always looking to like hit up on you and just like get with you real quick, you'll find out if he's trying just to go after the physical traits, right? Sometimes what he'll do is because he knows that you're going into the personality, you care about the personality and the relational part, they'll play down here, but their end goal is right at the beginning, right? Conversely, guys, you'll sometimes see that sometimes girls put you, friend zone you, right? They drop you right down here in the relational traits because they don't care to look at the physical or the personality traits, right? They don't actually want to take a real time to actually examine it because you're too important to me, right? So you can see you have to, when you talk to another individual, irregardless of gender, irregardless of age, you always have to start with the physical traits first. Can I have a discussion with this person? Then the personality, can we get along in this particular discussion? And then the relational, where's this discussion going to take our relationship and how are we going to continue to interconnect with each other, right? And typically that's how it starts out. Dude, bro, she's hot, right? Girls typically will wear the hot thing, right? Showing off the physical part first. I'm going to go talk to her, I'm going to go meet her. Guy goes and talks to the girl. Or girl knows the guy noticing him and starts to play a little bit back and forth. Is this guy really into me, or is he just trying to get at me? Right? That's the personality check that a lot of females are doing. And then the relationship, cool, what are we going to do? One night stand, or is this thing going to go like a month or two before I dump you? Right? Or are we actually going to get married? Like that's the conversation that comes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right? And typically for people that actually do care about this level, they'll start to let go the other two things, and those two things will just kind of play off of each other as this continues to develop, because you just go back and forth between the physical and personality. So if you want to know if your relationship with your like boyfriend or girlfriend is good or not, my question is, at what component are you relating to with this other person? Do you guys relate well just on the physical level? Because man, it's great, macking all the time and so on and so forth. So you can tell I'm from the 90s, right? Or is it, no, we get along really well. We're pretty good friends, so on and so forth. Like I can talk to him, he can talk to me, right? Or is it that, no, we can go back and forth between them and it's really fun to go back and forth between the two of them. And as a matter of fact, I'm gonna take this person along for a ride as I go for a ride, right? And if that's the case, that's how you know you have a relationship, right? Because you care about utilizing both of those as you're going along on your ride, right? And then when you all break up, or if you all break up, well now all of a sudden what caused it? The personality, the physical traits? Is someone not around enough? Does someone not feel like they're not around enough? Okay, so the better you understand these particular traits about you and in your life, the better you can apply them to your characters in a particular story. So, got another story for you. Okay, this one actually I had to switch the name out for, which I guess I'll get to in a minute. But there's another story I'm going to have about one of my friends who was on Glee. And she actually has an interesting story that combines the physical, the emotional, as well as the relational. Okay, and we'll see how it touches on there. So typically when you're writing, or not writing, but putting together stories about individuals, there are 8 slots you can slot those individuals into. And I'm going to define those really quickly here. First thing that we have is a protagonist, and then you have what's called an antagonist. Okay. Protagonist comes from the Greek word protagonistes, which means chief actor. It's the main person's perspective we're seeing the story from. Okay. The antagonist, or antagonistes, is the opponent, right? So if you're playing GTA 5, let's just go back to that particular story. There's 2 ways you can take a look at that story. The first one is you can take a look at it from Michael, Trevor, or Franklin's perspective. They got a lot of this cash money they need to make for X, Y, and Z particular reasons. And so they're going to go break the law and be challenged by those that are in charge of the law, the cops, the police, right? Maybe even other individuals. Those individuals would be considered to be opponents or antagonists, right? If you take that same story and you flip it, except you do it from the cops' perspective, right? You have cops or individuals that are trying to break in and do good, trying to take down the bad guys because those bad guys are bad, or those antagonists are bad. Okay, Trevor, Michael, and Franklin need to go to jail. That's fine as well. Protagonist and antagonist doesn't have to do with morality. It has to do with whose point of view you're seeing this particular story from, right? So the good guy could be Michael, Franklin, and Trevor. They could be the good guys, and the cops could be the bad guys. Right? Conversely, if you tell it from the cops' perspective, the cops are the good guys and Franklin, Michael, and Trevor are the bad guys. Right? If you take this idea and study it from a political angle, all of a sudden it can kind of make sense how you can take individuals that can be good and turn them bad, and take individuals that are bad and turn them good. Right? So there's a bunch of different ways you can utilize characters to tell a story how you want to. It doesn't necessarily make it right. Okay? In order to make a story right, or in order to play in morality, you have to pull from a moral source. The problem is that when you have moral ambiguity between different sources, that's what causes clashes between individuals. Okay? Because they're not buying in from the same set of morals. And you can argue all day long about what the morals are. The problem is that when you're arguing about morals, you're setting up religion. You're setting up theology. And so it's very difficult to have a conversation with an individual when you're talking about morals, which, by the way, is what's wrong with the political climate in our country. We keep on trying to have a moral argument rather than a story argument. Because in a lot of ways, there's different religions, quote unquote, that are banging together and they're clashing together, including atheism and agnosticism, right? Because they don't care about what your story is, they care about what code of ethics you subscribe to. And if you don't subscribe to theirs, or you don't subscribe to any at all, you're technically against individuals. Doesn't matter who those individuals are, right or left, right? You also have what are called heroes and anti-heroes, right? A hero is one who saves. It comes from the Greek word heros, literally means one who saves. And an anti-hero means against. So if you have heros and you have anti in front of it, it means it goes against the normal understanding of one who saves. So your hero, your typical hero, Captain America. His whole goal at the end of the day, he wants to just save people. If he doesn't save someone, it makes him sad, right? Because he wants to do the right thing. Captain America. A great anti-hero, Deadpool. He'll go around and save you if it's good for him. If he loves you and he cares about you, he'll go around and do whatever he can to make sure that you're good, and he'll have fun doing it. So he still has the same tropes, I guess you can say, as a hero, where he's going to do the saving, but he's not going to do it in a way where everyone wins, right? This is why in the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Thanos was able to have the argument that Captain America and Iron Man were more anti-heroes, because even though they were trying to save the Earth from all this destruction that Thanos was bringing down, they were destroying buildings in the process. Those buildings had people in them. You thought 9/11 was bad? Go back and watch the first Avengers or the second Avengers and see how basically an entire city or town crashes down to the earth. Buildings are being slammed up against by individuals, right? Stuff is falling down in the streets on cars that are driving through the city, right? So you can make that argument really, really good that, hey, the Avengers aren't people that are bad. Doesn't it mean to avenge something? Isn't that a bad trait for an individual to have? Right? And so you can see how Thanos' argument could be a good one. And that's what makes the Marvel Cinematic Universe good, is that, hey, from whose perspective are we taking a look at this from? Because whoever's perspective we're taking a look at this from, this can either be a good thing or a bad thing. Right? The next four. Okay? We have villain, foil, main character, and minor character. So let me describe a villain for you. A villain comes from the Latin word villa, which means large estate. It does not mean bad guy. Villains are anyone that have a lot of money. That's what the large estate means, because if you had a large estate, you owned a lot of property, you became powerful. Typically what happened back in these days is you'd have individuals that owned a lot of land that wouldn't subsidize that land to the poor people. Okay? So you would have this story of oppressor and oppressed. Okay, so you had this individual who had a lot or had a bunch who was not giving enough to people who had very little. And so the people that had all this stuff were constantly thought of and regarded as the bad guy, the bad person. So villains, which is what they were called because they owned big estates, were thought of as bad by the lay common person. Doesn't actually mean a bad thing. So if you take this understanding of the word and you apply it to our current president, you can see why that individual would constantly be portrayed as a villain, because he is, by the very definition of the word. Owns a lot of estates, owns a lot of real estate. Well, if there's a preconceived understanding that a villain is a bad person, that's a great story to start with. So any story that's attached to that individual that portrays that individual in a bad way, those that don't have enough or the same as this individual will attach their emotions into that particular story because they can insert themselves in that story and understand it from that perspective. They can't understand it from this perspective because they've never had a lot of money or a large estate, right? So you can see how you can utilize those to your advantage. This is why a lot of kings were thought of as bad kings, okay? This is why, if you want to go the Bible sense, Jesus had nothing, because if Jesus had everything, then he would be considered a villain, right? Because he might be going down to try and help people, but it doesn't matter. You still have all this stuff, so of course you'd be coming down here to help us out, right? Not talking from the religious perspective, talking from the literature perspective. You can't have an individual that has a lot of money lead a religious or revolution movement. This is why Bernie Sanders typically takes on the billionaires, right? Because you can put those individuals in a bad class. And he constantly talks about specifically how many donors he has to his base, because he's there for the people. He's trying to section himself away from these individuals. Okay? So you can kind of see how you can create a story of the people versus the powerful by just having Donald Trump versus Bernie Sanders. Right? It has nothing to actually do with their politics and what they actually think about and believe. It's great theater. It's a great story. But it's literally a story that you can actually use to kind of clash things so people can sit back and enjoy it. Right? Kardashians, villains. Lots of money. Kanye West now, and this is actually starting to happen very subtly in the rap hip hop culture. You have all these rappers that get a lot of this money, and they don't actually bring it back to their neighborhoods. Right? So they're constantly being viewed as villains, people that go and leave and don't come back to help their community. People that do come back and help their community and live in it are not villains because they're utilizing their money that they've won, or that they've gone out and conquered for, to try and help the people that they said they would help out. This is Nipsey Hussle, right? Someone who went back to the neighborhood in there and specifically tried to help out, try and help other people out, and didn't live like this even though he had the power to, which is why now Nipsey Hussle, instead of being considered a villain, is considered a hero, one who saves, which also helps sell more records and so on and so forth later on down the line, if you want to run with that story. So all of these stories that are interconnected with each other is just individuals being tossed into different categories. And so once you start understanding the categories, you can understand the story. You can start to see, oh, that's why that makes that much sense. That's why individuals are portraying them that particular way. Okay, that makes a lot more sense, right? Okay, so foils. Foils are basically the extras in a video that play in the background to give you an understanding of who the main characters are a little bit better. So it comes from the French word fouleur, which means to clothe fully. So in Spider-Man is, oh no, stuff is falling down. Oh, crazy. Spider-Man swings in on a spider web, sees a kid that's about to get hit by something, swings down, picks up that kid, jumps out of the way, drops the kid down, picks up and moves on. Okay? We don't care about how that kid got to where something was about to fall down on him. We don't even care why that kid isn't with his mom or dad. That kid only exists to show us that Spider-Man is someone who is swinging in and saving people. And then once he saves people, he picks them up, puts them out, cool, and then he can move on. That's the only reason why that character exists. So take two. That character would be considered a foil, right? Better understanding. It means to clothe fully more main characters or someone else that's outside of these characters. Okay. Last two, main character and minor character. Main character comes from the Norse word magin. It's the same word that we get the word magician, and it means someone who has physical powers. Okay, so main characters have the physical power to change the path of the protagonist in the story, right? So in the story of your life, main characters in your life would be your parents. They have the physical power to decide whether you can or cannot do something. They are not the main character, they are main characters, right? So that's how you can kind of see how you can build out a universe based on that particular information, right? Minor characters are individuals that are constantly in the background that are less than. They have somewhat of a power, but they don't have major power. Okay, so in this case, these are your current classmates. This is someone like me. I'm a minor character in your life throughout the day. You have to come spend an hour and 40 minutes with me. Some of you might like it, some of you might not like it. But either way, I'm just a minor character in your life throughout your day. You spend less than 10% of your day with me. Okay, which is crazy, right? But I might have a lot of impact on the way you're starting to think. So now I'm moving up more into the main character category, which means you're going to spend more time in here, right? And you can kind of see how you can move around and change characters and roles depending on how your story plays out. All right. So with that said, where do these take place? Okay. Remember, don't use the example. This is the example I was telling you about earlier. All this stuff we've talked about during the last lecture. I'm just inserting where these characters are dropped in and trying to show you how you can develop even just a short story once you understand where you can drag and drop certain characters to do certain things. So typically in the beginning, the setting's established, we talked about that. Then the main character and supporting characters are typically introduced, right? Also a main problem is loosely established. So here's my example. I have a graphic design student whose name is Jen. Jen's name is short for Jennifer Marie Johnson. She is 21 years old. She's a fair-skinned Norwegian with blue eyes, long curly red hair, and is 5 feet 6 inches tall. Okay? I'm introducing physical traits right off the bat. That's why they're bolded, right? You have a very good idea of what this person looks like and even maybe how they're going to act based on your own understanding of graphic design student, right? So it's going to be slightly different to you as the viewer or the audience because I didn't tell you directly how this individual is. Sometimes I might not need to because the only reason why that character is around is to serve another purpose, okay? By the time you get to the middle of the story, you want to establish other problems, and you also want to make sure the action is engrossing and going along. Now what's interesting is I actually established a problem here at the beginning. Doesn't seem like it, but I did. So contrary to typical redhead, she's actually easygoing and rather shy, so now you're getting to understand her personality a little bit more. She loves cats and has two of them named Bailey and Allie. She is a technical writing major with a minor in biology. Jen plays the piano and is an amateur photographer. She lives in the dorms at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and she eats pizza every day for lunch and loves red rose tea. She cracks her knuckles when she's nervous, right? So what's up? Is she real? Yes, she is actually based on a real person. It's one of my friends from college back in 2006, 2007. She ended up actually, if you go back and watch, I think it's the first 13 episodes, she is the redheaded cheerleader on Glee. Her name isn't Jennifer Marie Johnson. I had to switch that name out, but this is literally based on that individual. Okay, but right now, you're kind of either getting attached to this person or you're like, dude, this person's like ridiculous. I don't understand it. Okay, so that's at the personality stage. When you start to understand her relationships, that's when all of a sudden, oh, okay, now I can see how this story has weight to it, right? So the main problem is usually resolved by the end and the climax is reached and overcome. So here in my story, I'll continue. I'll say, unfortunately, a few months ago, Jen's mother committed suicide. Whoa, right? Bomb dropped, right? Talking about relationships. Moved from the physical to the personality to now relationships and how she doesn't have one with her mom and an action that her mom committed. Her mom right now is a main character, but isn't really discussed or talked about. As a matter of fact, it could even be said that her mom's a foil because it's just a background character actually that adds to this particular story. So while originally hard on Jen, she has since gotten over it. You see, Jen's understanding of the world makes her believe there's something more than just herself. With this self-reliance, because there's something more than just her, Jen has been able to step out into the world knowing that her mother's selfishness of ending her own life will not deter her from making a difference in the world, right? Tells you about the relationship that she's going to have with you if you were to approach her. Gives you very, very quick background and tells you very quickly how she is going to interact with you. And then you now make a decision as to whether or not you want to interact with someone like that. Because it's like, man, can I handle this heaviness of that particular mom not being around anymore? Can I actually deal with someone who is trying to make a difference in the world because her mom wasn't able to? Can I understand why she wants to make a difference in the world, even though that wasn't her original goal, right? And that she ended up taking over after her mom did whatever her mom did. Okay, so you can kind of see how this all ties in together. Now, a good story will cycle that back around and say, hey, how is Jen helping out people, right? And then we get to be reintroduced to Jen and find out more about her physical traits. She might change her hair color, chop off her hair, right? She might end up doing later on, she might end up getting a tattoo for stuff later on that reminds individuals about this individual, right? So there's a lot of different stuff that you can play with just starting with physical, personality, and relational traits, okay? So if we kick it back around to the end, or we do a cycle, right? You guys should have experienced an internal change. In some way, shape, or form, this should have hit you and been like, oh, well, I know someone who either had that happen to them, or, oh, that almost happened to me, right? That's how you know a story makes an impact, because you're able to kick it back around and let the viewer or the reader decide what they're going to do with that information. And it's not just, oh, I see that information, okay, good, it's done. Oh, I see that, and then it's done. You can still do that, but if you want a good story, that's what a good story does, okay? This means that they've grown up and developed as a person, perhaps overcoming a fear or recognize an unacknowledged truth about him or herself. Okay? A well-developed character allows the reader or viewer to connect with him or her, whoever that character is, on a deeper level. Okay? It invokes a sympathy, agitates a fear, or invigorates a change. Keywords there are sympathy, fear, and change. You either care about what's happening and what's going on, you don't want to be around that particular individual, or you yourself are going to experience some sort of change as a result of what's happening, right? Typically, it goes in those three particular ways, right? So that's what characters are. So if you remember, what I did for you guys was I gave you guys a very brief look at what I am hoping to get out of your guys for a story, okay? I displayed an image up on the screen last class period. And I'm going to display that image up on the screen again here in a couple of minutes. Now that you have an idea and an understanding of characters, once I display that image back up on the screen, you'll notice that the first thing you're going to notice is there are physical traits. The next thing you're going to have to figure out is how am I going to add personality traits? And then you can start to see some relational traits already occurring between those characters, but how are you going to make those relational traits work in a much bigger and larger world? How many other characters are we going to connect to based on what's happening in that particular image? Because if we decide that image is happening at the beginning of our story, then we're going to see more characters added in later on. If that image is happening towards the end of our story over here, then you're going to see we're going to end up with those two characters, and we're going to start out with completely separate characters. If it's happening in the middle, we might have some more characters on the side, and we have to figure out how those relationships work. And then once we figure out how those relationships work, we can figure out the different events that happen and so on and so forth. So think of it almost like The Sims, right? You choose your neighborhood, you drop your characters down inside of that neighborhood, and then what do they have to do? Well, they have to get a job because you need money, right? If there was no need to get money, then there'd be no need really to play the game, and you're just building stuff. You're just playing house, playing with either a dollhouse or playing with Lincoln Logs that are just digital, right? Okay. How are individuals going to, who's going to be coming in and out of that neighborhood, right? What is that character going to do a job? And if so, what is that job going to entail? How are they going to develop their skills and so on and so forth, right? So before you actually start doing that, I kind of want to show you what you're kind of in store for. I want to show you what it's like to actually sit down and try and come up with a story. And the best way that I can do that is by showing you a video from the AFI screen education film process. For those of you that have ever seen Lord of the Rings, you might know a guy by the name of Sean Astin who played Frodo. He's kind of the host. And what they're going to do today is they're going to talk about what's called the pre-writing phase. What do you do when you first get a subject or whatever to discuss and talk about? How do you come up with a story that will work for something that will eventually end up on screen? Is it something that you can just think up and then just write down really quickly or improvise? You don't even need to write down. Let's just improvise it and do it really quick because we got a camera. Or is it something you have to process and think about and look at the potential dangers ahead of time to decide which path you want to go down, because there's multiple paths in front of you, right? So that's what I want to play and go ahead and bring up next. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this particular screen. If there's still some stuff that you wish to write down, remember this PowerPoint is up on our haiku page. Let me see if I can find this here, because I know I have it. I was literally just watching it just a little bit ago. There it is. All right. Cool. Let's go ahead and take a look at what you guys will be doing over the next couple of weeks.
Hi, I'm Sean Astin. In the following chapters, we'll take you through script development, script writing and storyboarding, production and filming, editing, and exhibition and review. By the time you exhibit your film, you'll know many of the techniques and tricks that professional filmmakers use. With help from filmmakers, experienced screen ed students and teachers, and from AFI experts, we'll explore task number 1, script development. This is a critical aspect of pre-production. It's the work that takes place before you shoot your project. Script development involves 3 steps. First, in the pre-writing phase, you'll establish your goals, brainstorm with your group, and research the story you've chosen to tell. Next, you'll write a brief outline, then a 1-page treatment or summary of your idea. And finally, you'll pitch your idea to your class in hopes of getting a green light for your project. Okay, so let's get started. That means establishing a goal for your project and selecting the story that you want to tell.
The first step in the process for me as a teacher is to find a standard or standards that the students need to meet. Once I've established that, finding a creative way to meet those standards, and that's where the screen education process comes in.
You want to do some brainstorming, and that's when you sit down with your group or your crew and you share ideas about what type of story you want to tell and how you want to tell it. It also can help to have a model production in mind, something to emulate, a music video or a public service announcement, a news report or a documentary. All of these things have a specific look, a specific feel, and you can use those ideas to springboard into telling the best story possible.
They normally sit down and they're thinking about how do they tell this story? What is the best way to tell this story? What are the techniques they're going to be using to tell this story? How are they going to convince the rest of the class that their decision for telling it this way is a good one? And how are they going to make it interesting?
It's during this early goal setting, brainstorming, and research phase that you'll begin to collaborate, to share ideas and learn from your fellow students.
At the beginning.
Amazingly, no one really competed. we kind of just like blended all of our ideas together and said, okay, yeah, that works, or no, I kind of don't like that one. Like, we had no hard feelings really if we said, no, we don't like your idea. Like, we always stated why we didn't, and like, it was just collaboration the whole time.
Out of this collaboration comes agreement on what idea or story your group will explore. There's one last thing to do before you can start writing, though, and that's the research.
The value of research is being able to immerse yourself so completely in a story that you don't have to think about it anymore. And again, to make it authentic.
Now, as you research your film, be open to making changes based on what the characters or subject matter dictate. It can lead to creative interpretations you never even considered.
We were the group that had to adapt Romeo and Juliet in some way, and we had to pick a scene from the whole play and adapt it to whatever we wanted, either modern day or future or before the time. The research we put into it really helped in the script writing process because we kept that main idea in our minds, that they're gonna run away, that they do love each other, and that it's a forbidden love.
During the research phase, you need to not only explore and understand your story, you need to think about the resources you'll need to make your movie. So if you're going to include a certain song or book or article, make sure you know who owns the rights to that material.
Well, the problem is if we use still frames, are we going to have to acquire the rights to the pictures before we can use them?
Well, I checked with Mr. Daly, and he said that they're all in public domain, so we're free to use them if you want.
Okay.
The producer needs to think about acquiring the rights during the pre-production phase, way before filming. Don't assume anything and ask about everything. And when it comes to using other people's material, that other intellectual property, be it stock footage, be it a photograph, be it a piece of music, be it any of those things, people worked hard to create those, and you need to honor that.
Okay, since we got our picture thing figured out, how are we going to figure out our music?
Well, I think we can always make music using a program on the computer.
Or even sound effects that are on there.
Basic rule of filmmaking: don't use copyrighted material without permission. It's best to play it smart, otherwise you'll never be able to exhibit your film.
Okay, so what does that mean? We're going to try and stay away from copyright music as much as we possibly can here. When it comes to your music video, that's a bit of a different story. But other stuff, we're going to try and stay away from it. We're going to start creating our own. So part of what I'm going to be doing starting this semester and even moving into next semester is start teaching you guys how to utilize something like GarageBand so you can make your own sounds and make your own beats and not have to really think about it too much, but still get the vibe that you're looking for. Or if you want to license particular music to a film and not have to pay for the license, I'll go over with you guys how to do that as well. Because all the stuff we have on BNN is either stuff that we ourselves have created or we've acquired the license for. Okay, that's the reason why the meme going around about when Bronco Land comes on and so on and so forth. Everyone starts vibing, right? Okay, we're trying to create sounds that we own, that we get to control how people are going to feel, and that are uniquely us, not something that someone else can get. We know it goes all the way back here, specifically to this class, as much as we possibly can. Okay, so you'll start to see that as we continue to go and move through stuff this semester. Today, though, we're going to start on something a little bit different. Okay, as I said before, we're going to start on actually creating an outline for our videos. Perfect, thank you. By us creating those outlines for that particular video, gotcha. By us creating those outlines for that particular video, you'll start to see where some of the flaws are in your story and also where some things start to break down. So that way, before we even start writing our script or before we start filming, we can get all the bad stuff out as soon as possible. Typically, the rule of thumb is that you will have anywhere from 50 to 100 bad ideas before you have one good idea. Okay, so you want to try and write down all your bad ideas first to try and get them out of the way. That will eventually lead you to your good idea. Now, what's really cool is there's this thing that's called clustering or brainstorming. Do you guys know what clustering or brainstorming is? Should be pretty simplistic. It's where you literally, maybe a word web, okay, something else like that. It's where you begin to write down a word that you know will be associated with whatever film it is that you're going to be doing, and you can start making a story off of that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to make my life difficult, right? And I have no idea what word someone is going to give me, but I want someone in here to give me a word to start with. And what I'm going to try and do is come up with a story based off of that one word, just to kind of connect everything together. So who wants to give me a word to start out with? Go for it. Basketball, sweet, let's run with it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the word basketball, right? I haven't decided where this is going to occur yet in my particular story. That's the reason why I circled it, okay? Someone give me a word, the first thing you think of when you think of basketball. Hoop. Cool, okay? We'll go with that. We have a hoop over here, okay? So what I've done now is I've written down the word hoop and I've connected it to basketball. And the reason why I'm doing that is to make sure that as I'm developing my particular story, that I'm trying to connect as many of these things together as possible, okay? Someone else give me a word based on basketball. Anything. Cat, awesome, cool. Someone said cat, cool. Or ball, even just ball, right? All right, now give me another word when I say the word cat. Any word, dog, go for it. What else? Say it again, meow, cool, awesome. Dog, you have meow, right? Cool. When I say the word hoop, what's another word you think of? First thing that comes to your head. Poop, cool, I heard poop, awesome, right? I also heard court, right? Literally just writing stuff down that's all kind of interconnected. So I could literally start telling you the story about how this dog was wandering around this basketball court one of these days. It was just wandering around looking for whatever it could do. Had no idea what it was going for. Kind of looking maybe for a tennis ball and stuff when all of a sudden he heard a meow. There was this cat over in the corner. So the dog runs over and investigates and sees this cat taking a squat, taking a poop. Cat all of a sudden sees the dog. There's a stare down between the two of them, trying to figure out what they're going to do. Cat takes off running, dog takes off running after it. Okay? Pretty much incorporated all of those words at some point into that particular story. Right? So you can throw down words that literally have nothing to do with anything else and find a way to connect it. As a matter of fact, I'll make it even worse. Right? Kai, give me the first word that pops in your head right now. Food. Awesome. Someone's hungry. I am too. Okay. Cool. We're going to go Madison. Give me the first word that pops in your head. Doesn't have to relate to this. Just first word. Cat. Okay, cool. Great, because we just got done talking about a cat. Okay. This is another great way for me to start figuring out people's names. Natalie, give me the first word that pops in your head. Football. Cool. Awesome. Right? Someone try and stump me. First word that pops in your head. Marissa, give me first word that pops in your head. Green. Awesome. Cool. Okay. And even if I misheard it, I would still try and utilize it. Jacob, first word that pops in your head. Anything. Dog. Oh, goodness gracious. We're going back to the same thing. I'm going to go to a different thing other than dog. Let's see here. Nathan, give me something. The first thing that pops in your head. Disease. Fantastic. Okay. None of these words are interconnected, right? But you can create a story where all of a sudden they can be interconnected if you really wanted to. You could say that food is connected to cat, right? Might have thrown up something that was green because it ends up having a disease that's called like football player syndrome or something like that, right? Not necessarily a good story connecting it that way. So we're going to erase these connections, right? And we're going to try and see if we can create other connections, okay? There's this football player that has this disease, right? This disease causes him to think of his food as green, or to look like the color green, and taste like a cat, right? So you can find a different way that you can connect all of these different words together by just associating different words and tossing literally the first thing that comes down into your head, down on the ground. So, for example, when I put up your image, when I throw up this particular, if I can get my mouse over there, thank you. When I throw back up this image, right here up on the screen, and say that your story has to be about these individuals, at some point, these individuals have to be in there, you now have words to pull from. You have smile or laugh. You have egg. You have sad or grumpy. Okay? There's a lot of different words you can pull from that. But then you can start throwing out other random words and try and figure out how to connect those together to come up with your particular story. So for the rest of today, what you guys are going to do is start to try and figure that out. Now, there's a certain way that you can start to organize your story, and you can start organizing it as well in this particular way, utilizing a story outline. Okay? So I'm going to show you what that looks like and how you can pull from that. If you're not logged into your computer, you can log into your computer, or you can appoint someone, whoever you guys decide to be your producer, to log into your computer later on. And what we're going to do is we're going to start looking at what a story outline looks like. Okay, so if we go on our haiku page, you'll see I've added in a new content block under the course syllabus. That new content block has a story outline template as well as a story treatment template. Now, I know you don't know necessarily what the outline or treatment are yet. Okay, we're going to discuss those a little bit more next class period. As a matter of fact, next class period is pretty much spent on just utilizing these particular documents. But I at least want to get you started moving in the right direction. Okay, so if you click on story outline, here's what it actually looks like. Okay, again, this is just a template. It just structures things. There isn't like a paper that you have to start filling out things in. Literally, it's just settings with you listing out what those settings are, characters, you listing out what those characters are and providing some of the traits, putting your events and your events and development in order in bullet point form, not even full complete sentences, just very brief summations about what's going to happen in the story. These things build to a climax and then also give you a resolution. Okay? When you start writing or creating your story outline, one of the things that you're going to have to do is start figuring out the order of your events. And you can move the order of events around if you're on a computer. You can just copy paste and move it up or down. Okay? But as you're moving those items and events and things up and down, you can start keeping track of them by figuring out the time. So for example, if you figure out that this particular event right here is going really, really, really long, okay, you can say that this particular line is about 2 minutes. Right? This event is going to be 2 minutes. You can add in some development in there, some sub-bullet points about what happens and what develops in that 2 minutes, but we know that that first event is going to take 2 minutes. Okay? Conversely, you might have another event that happens. Maybe the egg goes splat. How long does that take? It takes about it takes about 10 seconds. You can start figuring out, okay, that's going to start taking that long. And you can continue to go down the line, adding up how long you think each particular segment is going to be, roughly. It doesn't have to be exact, but at least it gets you in the ballpark. Because if I tell you your video has to be 5 minutes long, how do you know when you've had enough? Right? So the only way you can start really figuring it out is by timing it and by discussing and seeing what's inside of it. And you'll see as we move further and further into the year, I'm going to start teaching you guys how to use applications that will start timing stuff for you based on either the amount of words that are in it or based on that particular event itself. Because sometimes you might say, hey, we've got a really cool story, but we're only at 3 minutes. Where can we add stuff in, and why are we going to add it into this part of the story as opposed to this part of the story? We have some time to fill. Like every morning, like this morning, BNN, 10-minute long show. When I walked in this morning, we had no idea what that show was going to look like. If you take a look at the show, it's 10 minutes and 2 seconds. Those extra 2 seconds are the black at the end that someone forgot to hit the stream and code stop on. Actually, literally, like it just stays on black for like 5 seconds. Others have been less than 10 minutes. Our goal, we only have 10 minutes for the announcements each day. So how do we decide what goes in there and what gets taken out? Right? We have to time things and see how we can deliver stuff within that particular time period. So this will allow you to start timing out your stuff. Eventually, you'll write down what your climax is and what your resolution is for your particular story. You'll know how long it is. You'll know what's supposed to happen in your story. And you'll know that, hey, if you want to delete stuff out, how much time you have to add something new in. Okay? So here's what we're going to be doing for the rest of today. And then also next class period quite a bit. You guys are going to begin to create a one-page story outline that will eventually be turned into a 5-minute script. Make sure to include the 6 components of storytelling in your writing, like I just got done showing you. Okay, setting, characters, events, development, climax, and resolution, as well as begin to develop the character's physical, personality, or personal, and relational traits. Because the better you understand those traits, the more likely you are to tell a story that's interesting and that goes really well for this particular project. Now, you'll also notice that as you're developing this, you don't have a producer or director for your group. So by the end of today as well, once you figure out who's supposed to be in charge and do what, I want you guys to start choosing a producer and director, because next class period, I'm going to find out who those individuals are. And if things are not going well for a particular group, I might talk to that group's producer. If the direction of the story is getting stuck, I'm going to talk to that group's director. For everyone else that's in there, that's just the talent that's providing things that are going along. If they're not doing their role, I'm going to make sure to get the talent going, because the producer and director are going to let me know, hey, stuff isn't going. Here's what needs to be fixed. right? So we're trying to integrate these structures and stuff that I've been discussing for these last few periods into an actual project. And that's what we're going to start for today.